talents. Douglas Holtz Eakin is a former director of the Congressional Budget Office. He provided counsel, of course, to Senator McCain in his election effort. Joining us as well, Josh Barrow, Bloomberg View consultant. Gentlemen, good to see you rested after staying up until 2:15 a.m. election night. Doug, let's go to a president comment. Election night. Seems like old news, distant news from where we are as Juliana Goldman speaks to the president today. Here is a quote from President Obama, election night. And this is in the heart of the celebration. "We are greater than the sum of our individual ambitions, and we remain more than the collection of red states and blue states. We are and forever will be the United States of America." How distant are we from that after what we've seen the last 10 days?
Well, I mean, on the surface, quite far apart. But remember, there's a lot of politics here. And what you would hope is that underneath the surface, behind the political statements out front, they're going to reach a better deal than we've seen on the surface.
You're a Princeton PhD. Robert Lighton is a Yale PhD. He was on the other day suggesting there's a smallness here. Should they be thinking bigger?
I think they need to think two different things. I mean, they need to think small in the lame duck. They don't have a lot of time. The fiscal cliff is not very far away, and this is a tough deal to cut. So get as little as you need to get to next spring. Then they need to think big. We have a big, big, big debt problem. It's projected to get larger. It is fundamentally a spending problem. That was the lesson of Bowles-Simpson. And we need to have the tax and entitlement reforms to take this on. That's a big question.
Josh Barrow, if they can't get a deal done, even if the Republicans get blamed, would the president really risk not being able to complete any of his goals for the second term if the U.S. falls back into recession?
Well, so what makes me nervous is that I'm starting to hear from more and more liberals that it's not so bad if we go into January on the fiscal cliff, that we can go over it and then we can unwind it later. And what makes me nervous about that is that, if it's January 20th or January 30th and you still haven't unwound it, it's never a disaster to go a few more days. And so it's not like the debt ceiling where, when you hit it, you hit it. So I'm worried that this could drag on for a long time and damage the economy. And I don't think the president wants to end up going there, but I'm worried that he could end up.
Doug, please.
I think it's worse than that. I think if we go over the cliff, you see sharp market sell-offs, you see sharp declines in consumer confidence, and you don't unwind those. You cannot put that genie back in the bottle. So I think the nation's actually at great risk.
Roger Altman talks about the market vigilantes. You talk about the market vigilantes. We talked about it earlier. Do you believe in it? Does Washington aware what the markets can do here?
I think Washington can be made aware of what the markets can do. I think that affected the debt ceiling debate back in 2011. I think the Republicans were very spooked by that. And spooked. I think, yes.
I agree.
And I think, when Lehman Brothers failed, I think obviously the impact of the markets on Washington was very big, but they have to actually move. Now I think what the markets see is we still have a month to figure this out. A month is a long time. The parties can be signaling tremendous division and still be able to come to a deal in a month.
But I worry, Josh is right, there is a strong segment of Washington that does believe this is not a cliff, it's a slope, that does believe you can go over and quickly hit reverse, never fall into the abyss. And that's a dangerous way to think in these circumstances because it allows you to, for purely political purposes, push harder. And, we've already seen a tremendous amount of movement. The Republican offer yesterday was under $2 of spending for every dollar of taxes. That's way far away from where they started. And the question is, how far will the president push at risk of hitting the cliff?
It's still half of what the president has presented in terms of revenue increases, and it does so without raising the rates on taxes. Is that mathematically viable?
It's absolutely mathematically viable, and it's actually economically desirable. I mean, what's getting lost in this discussion is the fact that from here to December 31st, our problem is taxes are going up too much and spending is going down too much, and we need to avoid the recession. Then you have to reverse gears and get to the spring and get the revenue and get the spending. So it's hard for politicians to do two different things at the same time, but that's where we are.
You're both Washington watchers. I'm not. I think of Robert Caro and LBJ. Does this president need to be more LBJ? Josh, do we need a president, forget about Wall Street, he needs to be more activist with legislators and say, I think this is important?
Sure. I think one of the real weaknesses of the Obama administration is that the president doesn't really like working with Congress, doesn't thrive on those sorts of negotiations.
Do you agree?
Absolutely. It's a serious problem for the administration, even, in that they do not get their objectives accomplished because they don't do the work on Capitol Hill.
I mean, they have frontline PhDs working here. Jason Furman, Gene Sperling, not a PhD, but fine. He's got a lot of experience. Peter Orszag earlier, great.
Yeah, and we're famous for our personalities and our ability to slap people in the back to get the deal done. That's the problem.
There's got to be one here. Doug Holtz Eakin, they have both now presented their plans. We heard from the Republicans Republicans last night, both more than $2 trillion in spending cuts and tax increases. How far apart are these plans?
The plans are really far apart, especially on the spending side. I mean, remember, they keep saying the president's budget contains all these very specific proposals. I actually looked at it. There are 258 proposals for taxes or for serious entitlement cuts. There are only 15 for Medicare, totaling $300 billion. We're going to spend $8 trillion on Medicare. There are only 5 on Medicaid, totaling $50 billion. We're going to spend $5 trillion on Medicaid. There's no there there.
Well, we've looked for the there from the Congressional Budget Office. Douglas Holtz Eakin, thank you.
Thank you.